The second.
Дивіться всі на мене.
We're gathered here today to commemorate the declaration of Ukrainian independence and founding of the Ukrainian National Republic on January 22, 1918, and the unification of Eastern and Western Ukraine into one great nation on January 22nd, a year later in 1919.
Yearly, we honor the date. We honor this date, taking time to reflect on our history, but more importantly, on our future. And the underlying message is always unity.
We need to be standing in solidarity with those countries that are once again about to be victimized by Putin and the Russians. 8 years ago, I was honored to be asked to be part of a delegation that went to Kyiv. It was headed up by the late Senator John McCain, a bipartisan coalition. Because let me tell you, and Ambassador Markarova can tell you as well, the support for Ukraine, the support for all these nations is bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans all feel strongly about this. So we're not just here in some sentimental journey. We're here in a very real mission to save lives. Here's the good news for you. With Senator Portman, the Republican of Ohio, we have a bipartisan Senate caucus for the Ukrainian people. I am honored to be its co-chair. We are determined to show a united front. Just 2 weeks ago, I was mentioning to the ambassador, I got a phone call in my office in the Capitol. And the voice on the other side said, this woman said, do you have time to speak to the president? I said, I always have time to speak to the president. President Biden came on and he said he was sitting in the Oval Office with Secretary Blinken, and they were discussing what to do about Ukraine and what our response should be, and he was kind enough to ask me what I thought. Well, I hope my presence today indicates what I told him. I believe that we have a moral obligation that goes beyond any treaty to stand by these people who are about to be victimized. And I want to say one kind word more about Ukraine. I'm sure it will be well received in this audience. When Ukraine finally won its independence from the Soviet Union, one of the things it did, which was remarkable, was to decide to dismantle all of the Soviet nuclear weapons which were in place in Ukraine. It was an act of a peace-loving nation that wanted to see a new generation of peace for the people who lived in Ukraine and for those in the region. That, to me, is what typifies Ukraine today. But we all have to stand together, and we have to engage our friends from all around the region to stand with us, to understand that when it comes to freedom and independence, there's no partisanship. There's no political side to it. It is the right thing to do, the moral thing to do. It really summons us to our highest character. I'm honored that you would let me come and say a few words today, but I will keep you in my heart every day. Thank you for allowing me to come.
The real deal is we know that the denial of freedom anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere. We know that the people of Ukraine simply want what every other freedom-loving person wants, and that is the opportunity to decide for themselves what it is that they do. And I can tell you, we will stand with you as you will stand with Ukraine. We will say to President Biden, we will reinforce to our president that at all costs, we must protect the liberty of our friends and neighbors and colleagues in Ukraine. And to Putin, hell no, people won't go.
I think it's fair to ask, why Ukraine? I think many Americans who don't pay attention to these things say, why Ukraine? You know, I remind them that it has been Ukraine that has fought Putin for the last 7 years. It's Ukrainian blood that is on that soil. It is Ukraine that has fought the effort, more than any others, to reassemble the Soviet Union. This isn't a Ukrainian problem, right? This is not just Ukraine, it is Belarus and Moldova, it is all of it, it's the Baltics, it's all of Eastern Europe. When we've been to these countries, right? I was in Georgia, they talked about this. I was in Poland, the same threats are there. So if anyone imagines it's not our problem, or think that they can live like an ostrich, they can't. Putin is a threat to Eastern Europe, to Western Europe, and of course the world. So where we stand with Ukraine now because they're our dear friends, and they're our extraordinary allies, and they deserve better than this.
I'm for Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. I'm for Ukraine's right to determine who its friends and its allies and partners are going to be. I'm for Ukraine's right to economic prosperity and its ability to flourish just as any other country in Europe can flourish. And let me tell you what I'm against. I'm against any Russian incursion, aggression, or invasion, however minor or major, on the borders of Ukraine. We are against any Russian attempt to subvert Ukraine's right to self-determination, and we are against any attempt to overthrow the government of Ukraine. Oh, one more thing I'm against. I'm against Vladimir Putin. We are unified against bullies and thugs and anyone who would seek to get their way through violence or aggression, as Mr. Putin does. Accordingly, we, colleagues from the Illinois delegation, along with others, are strongly in favor of the Defense of Ukrainian Sovereignty Act. It's called the mother of all sanctions bills in Congress. This basically imposes economic sanctions against Russian government officials, institutions, and transactions, and yes, we will shut down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We will absolutely shut that thing down. No way in hell, as Danny would say, are they going to get that thing if they threaten any incursion into Ukraine. We're also going to make sure that we supply Stinger anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine and Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. We're going to provide $200 million in extra military aid. And of course, we will provide USAID financing as well to get through this harsh winter and what is to come. There are costs to anything that Russia does, and we will ratchet up those costs as much as we have to do to make sure that Russia understands that going into Ukraine will be prohibitively costly. And so I just want to say thank you again for all of you standing with Ukraine. Thank you all of you for coming out in the cold weather and this pandemic to stand in a united fashion against Russia. It's cold outside, but it's warm here. And it's not just the temperature, it's the good feelings that we have for each other and for Ukraine. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And God bless Ukraine.
As vulnerable as Ukraine is, when our country sought to withhold your defense
to ask you to interfere in our elections. Ukraine stood up for democracy. And so much of who we are as a country today is because Ukrainians showed a commitment to democracy that some leaders in our country didn't. And we owe you our eternal gratitude for that, probably more than we know.
For 7 years, Ukrainians are continuing their struggle to live normal lives in a democratic Ukraine in dignity, where their right to freedom, liberty, and human rights are guaranteed in the Constitution. Ukrainians all over the world are united. We stand with Ukraine and proudly say, glory to Ukraine, glory to our heroes. Slava Ukraini! Thank you.
Our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Oksana Markarova, Ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. She comes to us today at this challenging time when Ukraine is at the center of the world's attention as it faces the threat of a Russian invasion. At a time when the fate of Ukraine is linked with the fate and security of the Western world. Ambassador Markarova was appointed to Washington in April of only last year. It hasn't been a year yet, and she has taken on the task of promoting the interests of Ukraine in Washington with an extraordinary force of political and negotiating savvy. Ambassador Markarova belongs to the category of leaders that can. So let me welcome Her Excellency Oksana Markarova, Ambassador of Ukraine, Посол України, Шановна Oksana Markarova.
There is no better day for all of us to meet today, and I am so honored that, Senator, you are with us today, and all the congressmen. It means a lot, not only to Ukrainian Americans, but also to Ukrainians. Because even though 9,000 kilometers are between our two countries, but we have more in common than a long distance that is between us. Our both nations are freedom-loving nations. Americans and Ukrainians not only cherish and love freedom, but we are willing to fight for it. As last year we have celebrated 30th anniversary of renewed independence of Ukraine, we all know that it's not 30 years that we have behind us. Our country is not 30 years old. And today's celebration of the Unification Day, День Соборності, actually is one of the reminders of a great history that we have behind us. Regardless of all of the differences that we might have, we are very united in one thing. We are democratic, European country, and we want to decide ourselves how to govern our own country, what to do in our own country. And sometimes we will make mistakes, but those will be our mistakes. But there is no differences of opinion in Ukraine where we want to be. We've made the civilizational choice to be a democratic country, to be part of the European Union, and to be part of NATO. This choice is not discussable. This is where we will be, regardless of what Russia does. And regardless of how you call it, Russian Federation, Soviet Union, Russian Empire, successful and democratic Ukraine is a threat to autocratic Russian regime. And that's why it's important for all the civilized nations to stand with us. Since 2014, Russia not only illegally annexed Crimea, and we will never agree to that. Crimea is Ukraine, and Crimea will be back. And Russia backed the terrorists who illegally occupied the parts of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, and we will never agree to that. and Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast will be back, and Ukraine will be whole. We have lost more than 14,000 people, our brave heroes, men and women, who defended us and continue to defend us on the front line, but also civilians. We all want to know the answer to the question whether Putin will attack again. And I think the answer to that question, we all know, is dependent on two very other important two questions. First, whether it's going to be easy for him, whether Ukraine will resist or not. And let me be very clear here. Ukraine will resist. It's not going to be a walk, it's not going to be a pleasant excursion into our country. Everyone, the Ukrainian battle-tested, very motivated and capable army, Ukrainian more than 400,000 veterans who will all come back and who will all defend, but also all women and men of Ukraine. All of us as one team, regardless again where we come from, regardless of our political affiliations, we all will be defending our country. So it's going to be very hard for Mr. Putin. But the second part of that is whether the collective West or the civilized world will stand with us. And I think we all know the answer to that question as well. That our partners, and first and foremost the United States, our strategic partner and friend number one, is with us. And we would like to thank you for that. We've never had a better friend than the United States. We have renewed our strategic partnership charter in November, and that charter focuses on three main areas: on security and defense, how our countries together will work in order to ensure that Ukraine can defend ourselves, but also become member of NATO, become member of Europe, and to be an important solution to the security in Europe, the economic transformation, and all other cooperation that we can have in economy, energy, and other spheres. We have, for the first time between our countries, signed the framework defense agreement between the Pentagon and the Ministry of Defense. And we have started already realizing that. So I would like to thank again for all the military support that we are receiving. I would like to thank the Congress. And again, we value indeed the bipartisan, bi-chamber support that we have from the US Congress and from the leadership of the country. The second is the economic deterrence, the sanctions. And I was very glad to hear that we are talking about sanctions now. They are not preemptive sanctions. Putin already attacked us. And he didn't change his behavior, and he's still in Crimea, and he's still in Donetsk and Lugansk. So we are asking all of our partners, please increase the sanctions until he changes the behavior. Do not wait for him to attack us again. He attacked us already, and the sanctions need to be broadened, and the sanctions need to be very hard, and sanctions need to be very painful, so that he actually retreats to his own country, and we can deal with our country. And the third level is security deterrence. And it's very important. We're very grateful for the increased amount of all the military defense, but we need more. We need more because Ukraine is now at the forefront of this fight for democracy. It's not only Ukraine that Putin wants. He wants, as he said himself in his articles and statements, he believes that the dissolution of the Soviet Union has been the greatest mistake. We fought very hard for that mistake to be done. We wanted to be free, and we are finally free. But in order, as any bully, in order for him to understand that we will remain sovereign and we will remain independent, and he shouldn't even try, we need to be strong. We have always been a nation of very peaceful bread growers. We never attacked anyone. We never were aggressive to anyone. But it's time in the history when we have to also show teeth. And you saw that our brave soldiers are surprising again, as we surprised the world in Maidan, 2 Maidans, as we surprised the world in 1991, when the majority of Ukrainians voted for independence, as we surprised the world in 1918, when even students went ahead and defended their country. We are ready to continue to surprise the world, because we will fight for our country, because that's the only country that we have. So with that, I would like to thank the Ukrainian Congress Committee, all of you friends, the Ukrainian Americans, as we say, Ukrainians by birth, by blood, or by choice, for doing daily very important work for Ukraine, for praying for Ukraine, for believing in Ukraine, for helping Ukraine, for preserving Ukraine when we were under occupation. I'm very actually optimistic, even though we have the Armada on our border, even though Putin, a nuclear power, is threatening us on a daily basis. I'm very optimistic about the Ukrainian prospects. I'm the last generation that was born in the Soviet Union. I remember the Unity Day, the Соборності. My parents took me to the streets in Rivne, where we stood holding hands in 1990 in order to show everyone that, you know, Ukraine is united, that we want to be together, that this is the future that we want for us to be independent, but also to be united. The kids who are now were born after 1991, thanks God, do not know that there is any other possibility that, other than for Ukraine to be independent, sovereign, and to be an independent country. And these children will never agree to be back to any type of occupation, whether it's called the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire or whatever. So I know that we will prevail this time. But as any democratic country, because we value every Ukrainian, we of course are working very hard on the diplomatic solution to this. Because unlike Mr. Putin, we do not want to lose any of the talented Ukrainians that we have. As you saw in that movie, we have the brave soldiers who are defending us, but they would be very effective in growing trees or raising children or doing something in order to develop our country. So with that, I would like to ask everyone, let's stay united, Ukraine and the US. Let's together convince all of our European partners and friends that this is time to stand for values and principles. This is time not to think about the losses for businesses, which we understand are painful for any country. But it's not about that. So when we ask to implement sanctions, when we ask to stop the Nord Stream 2, when we ask to provide us with all kinds of the security and deterrence, we also ask to stand with us, because this is the right thing to do, as we heard today. We are positive that this time our renewed independence that started 30 years ago will be forever. And it's going to be a result of all of our actions together, and it's going to be a result of us and the United States, our strategic partner #1, working together in order to ensure that. Slava Ukraini, and God bless America.
I call upon our entire Ukrainian American community in the United States, stand up, be counted, voice your concerns, be heard. It's a call to arms for all of us. We at the UCCA will continue to lead and advance this effort until Ukraine is once again whole and free. God bless America. Slava Ukraini.